highway safety plan. You might as well flip into the next one, though.
Great.
We'll start briefly with what is a strategic highway safety plan. Next. It's a comprehensive highway safety framework. It really just sets the direction for the next 5 years in highway safety for the organization. It is required every 5 years. And it's data driven. This is all these things I'm reading to you here are off the federal highway definition. That means that we look at crash data to find out what our problem areas are and then develop solutions for them. So we're not just guessing, we're looking at the previous 5 years crash data. And it's coordinated, which means if you hit the next slide here, that we do it with a big group of people, a very diverse group of people. So you see here we have professional organizations, advocacy groups, public works at all levels, law enforcement at all levels, private businesses, um, federal agencies, MPOs, RPCs, the whole bit. And they all come together. For us, this was about 75 people that were active participants and then sort of a panel for us as well. Next slide. And at the end of the day, a strategic highway safety plan is emphasis areas and solutions. Emphasis areas are those areas we need to concentrate on, and solutions are what we're going to do about it. Next. I'm not going to go into the safe system very much, just that it's in the last decade or so, how we do highway safety increasingly. It's it's governed by six principles, which are the outer ring there of the diagram. And the tools that get it done are the five elements that are the inner ring. Next slide. So we believe in this so much, we named the chapters of the SHSP after the principle. So death and serious injury are unacceptable. That's where we talk about our show me zero vision. Humans are vulnerable is where we give the statistics on fatals and serious injuries over the last 5 years. Humans make mistakes is where we talk about the behavioral focus of the SHSP. We know that most of our crashes are behavioral based in Missouri, about 75% of them. So we try to have a focus on behavior. Safety is proactive. That's the chapter where we talk about our emphasis areas, these problem areas in the state that we need to concentrate on. Incidentally, and I'll get into this more in a second, but that's broken up into the five elements of the safe system. That was that inner ring I was showing you a second ago. Um, so that's what incorporates the elements into this. And then our final chapter is redundancy is crucial and responsibility is shared. And that's where we give solutions. Those two things because the solutions are redundant. They are, they're going towards those elements that if one of those should fail, something else should be able to come in there and pick it up. And then responsibility is shared. That's talking about how solving this problem of highway safety is not a MoDOT problem, but it actually is a responsibility of every I wouldn't even say every citizen in Missouri. I'd say every driver in Missouri, even those that don't live here. So I'm showing you this table of contents just to show you that we actually literally built this plan around the safe system. We'll get into it here in a second. Next slide. These are our emphasis areas. Again, if the color coding, if you remember the wheel I showed you 30 seconds ago, this is how we group these. So safer people, this is where we put sort of these behavioral issues like distracted driving, unrestrained occupants, impaired driving, teen drivers, and older drivers. Of course, being a teenager or an older person is not a behavior, but since they're people, we stuck them here in the safer people. Safer vehicles is a category usually reserved for safety innovations on cars, anti-lock braking, lane keeping assistance, that sort of thing. But we have, as a state, we have very little control over what the auto industry does. And by very little, I mean none at all. So we use the safer vehicles category to talk about classes of vehicles that we need to pay attention to. In Missouri, those are motorcycles, commercial motor vehicles, and off-highway vehicles. Off-highway vehicles being ATVs and UTVs and that sort of thing. Safer speeds is just what it sounds like. That's about speeding and aggressive driving. Safer infrastructure. This is where we put our vulnerable road users, our participants in active transportation. And it seems at first like a weird place to put it, but it was pointed out to us very early on in this process by some of our partners, including Jackson, that we were going to put the VRU in behavioral, but it was pointed out that yes, sometimes vulnerable user fatalities and injuries are that person's fault, but a lot of time it is the built environment around that user. The incorrect speed or crossing that's way too wide. So we put VRU into infrastructure because that's where we think that we can probably have the greatest impact on it. Um, Also under infrastructure is critical roadway locations. That is essentially roadway departure crashes and intersection crashes. And our final emphasis area and element of the safe system is safer responses. And that's all about post-crash care. This is important to us because we know that, I don't know, about 43% of adults that die in a crash were alive when first responders got there. So this is all about finding ways to keep them alive, even though a crash has already happened. I'd say those first four are about preventing a crash. This is another layer of redundancy about, okay, so you weren't able to prevent it, but what can we do about keeping people alive now that it's happened? Next slide. And I just want to show you what a typical emphasis area write-up looks like in our plan. These are all about 1 to 2 pages long. We purposely kept them brief because we wanted to keep this whole document about 50 pages long. Just we thought we'd get better readership doing that. Wasn't quite able to get there. I think we're a little over 60, but it's close. All that to say, each one of these 12 emphasis areas is a pretty short write-up. So every one of them, of course, they're color coded according to the element, and then the header up there shows what they are. But every one of them gives a brief write-up about the situation. And then we will share data, the crash data over the past 5 years. You're looking at older drivers here. In this case, it's slowly creeping up. That's a disturbing trend, but what it does is it shows us the magnitude of that problem. And then we'll have an infographic if it's appropriate or a photograph, just to give some visual appeal and kind of break up the text. At the bottom, you see two columns. One says continue and one says beware. Um, this is a holdover from the SWOT analyses we did when we got in with our emphasis area teams and sort of analyzed this. In a SWOT analysis, of course, that means strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Strengths are those things that um, occur in your organization that are helpful to your cause. And, there's nothing you do about those. You just keep doing them. And that's what this continues all about. These strengths, these things we do well, um, are what this column's all about. We didn't want to just beat people up and tell them where they're failing. We wanted to encourage them. So in this case, for older drivers, it's providing better, more visible sign-in and pavement markings. MoDOT does a great job of that. That's something we want to keep doing. So on the flip side of that is that beware column. These are really the threats from the SWOT analysis. Threats being defined as those things occurring outside your organization that are harmful to your cause. They're outside our organization. Organization being the coalition, by the way, not MoDOT. There's not a lot we can do about them, but we can just keep an eye on them. Kind of, as the title says, they're beware of them. In this case of older drivers, one of them is reluctance to relinquish driver license when needed. So that's every emphasis area has those two things just to kind of encourage people that they're doing well and then tell them what to beware of. Everything else, the opportunities and the weaknesses show up in our solutions. So if you'll flip a slide, and this is a typical solutions page. Remember, the name of this chapter is Redundancy is Crucial and Responsibility is Shared. So starting with the responsibility is shared, we have these grouped by the people most likely to be able to accomplish this solution. And those groupings are businesses. I think you're looking at cities and counties here, education at all levels, civic groups, law enforcement, courts, healthcare, engineering, MPOs and RPCs, state officials. And that's all well and good. But even if you're just a person out there saying, well, I'm not any of those things he just read, what can I do about safety? We actually have a grouping for families and individuals. And there's all kinds of things that you can do just by being a person in Missouri. Um, that grouping was really popular with our coalition, and it's something that we held over. But something we added this year is that redundancy piece. So every one of these is also related to those safe system elements to which it applies. And it just demonstrates to the reader that there are many levels. I mean, that very first one hits 4 of the 5. So again, if one of those pieces should fail, another one should be there to pick it up. Next slide. And this is our vulnerable road user safety assessment. Katie's going to talk about that in a little more depth right after me here. But it is a part of the strategic, a required part of the strategic highway safety plan. The problem is, I think it's over 100 pages. It's got a lot of pages in it anyway, and we were trying to keep this thing short. So while it is a part of this and no less important than any other part of this, we presented it with a short write-up, a short summary, and then a QR code where you can hit that and go review the whole document online. And I believe that's all I have to say this morning.